Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and believe it or not, another election is looming. So we have with us tonight a guest from DuPage County. This is Laurie Nowak. Laurie is running for re-election for County Commissioner, DuPage County. So Laurie, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation.
So normally, because we're in Cook County, we talk a lot about Cook, but this show broadcasts to DuPage. So tell us a little bit about DuPage County and the DuPage County Board and how it's composed, how many people are on it. Just give us a little background on what, first of all, let's start with the county. How big is DuPage County in terms of population?
Close to 1 million people.
So it's a big population center,
yes,
right?
Yes, and growing. So.
And it lies southwest of mostly west of Cook County.
Yes.
And what major towns are in DuPage?
Elmhurst, Naperville, Wheaton. My district is more Bartlett, Hanover Park, West Chicago, Warrenville, Winfield. Mm-hmm.
So before the show, we were talking a little bit about your background, which I think is really fascinating. You have come to the county board and you're running for your second term. These are four-year terms, right?
Yeah, well, actually, because of redistricting, my first term is a 2-year term. So it was just luck of the draw, but I'll be going for a 4-year term now.
And so you came to this more or less right out of college, didn't you?
Somewhat, yeah. After I graduated, I did AmeriCorps in Chicago and was hired there doing a youth services program and teaching English to adults, but got involved in local politics, or continued to be involved in local politics and community issues. Yeah, and I just thought that there was a need for some different voices on the board.
Well, in particular, you mentioned before the show that the demographic breakdown is a little skewed and the gender breakdown is a little skewed.
Yes, actually when I ran there was only one woman on the board of 18 people, so I thought that was a problem. It's kind of an interesting situation because we actually did have someone on the board who was in their 20s, which is pretty rare. So I'm the second addition to that now, but yeah, I think just in terms of even politics, it's an 18-member board and there's only 3 Democrats on the board, even though the demographics in DuPage are changing and there are more Democrats. It's just a much more economically diverse situation than it was 10, 15 years ago. And I think that the representation when it comes to politics is lagging, and especially you see that on school boards, but on the county board as well.
So why do we, if the demographics and the voter registrations have shifted so much, why do we still see that there's this great majority for the Republicans if that majority doesn't exist in the general population?
I guess it would probably be a couple different things. Having been established so much longer and having a stronger roots in DuPage probably contributes, and just voter turnout. It's there's a whole lot of theories about the philosophy and psychology behind voter turnout, but
well, I know in the recent primary, at least in Cook County, the turnout was about 15% for the primary.
Yeah.
Yes, which is very disappointing, especially when we look at countries overseas where people fight and die for the right to vote.
Exactly. So I definitely encourage people to get involved and participate as much as possible, because in our everyday lives, there's issues that affect us, and especially on this local political level, I mean, that's the day-to-day stuff. The roads that you're driving on, if you're driving down a county road, if your house didn't get flooded out because of our preventative stormwater, if you're a business owner, if you're a parent whose kid is in a local school, all these are local politics, and that's what hits home.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I do know people, I've run into many of them who will talk about voting and say, well, I only voted the presidential elections.
Yeah.
And my answer is, well, the president does not set your property taxes.
Exactly.
Right? So the local does. And well, actually, when you're out and you're knocking on doors or doing campaign events, how do you get people to try to understand that this really does affect them, especially door to door? I mean, the people who come to political events come because they already know.
Sure.
But the door to door, the retail politics, it's harder. So what do you do to try to get them involved?
Well, I think just the direct contact. I mean, a lot of people will tell me, I've never met my county board member. I don't even know what the county does, what services they provide. So I think having that direct connection and being able to explain to people and just have a conversation with them and let them know how important it is, but have them draw that conclusion for themselves, because, I think most people, once they realize, they will do that. Yeah.
Once they realize that how this matters to them.
Yes.
Right? Like your property taxes is a great example,
Exactly.
right? That's the county really determines what's going to happen there.
Exactly.
And if you want to appeal them, you have to go back to the county, right?
Right, and just having the conversation, being open, making sure that people do know what are the issues that we're dealing with, what are some upcoming votes that we're going to be taking, because if you don't know, how can you care about something? So I think definitely just having that conversation open and meeting people where they are. You can't expect that in people's busy everyday lives that they're going to have time to seek out things, and especially, even though, for example, the county board meetings are publicized on the website, they're taped. But even just the process that we go through and, approving resolutions, it's going to take someone who's pretty determined to kind of sort through what all this means. And I find it to be my job to be a liaison between constituents and county business, because how can I be voting on something if I'm not having a conversation with constituents? And I think that they deserve to know in simple terms without making it be a chore for them. I think that they deserve to hear what's going on. So that's been a priority of mine.
Wow, that's like hearing a civics lesson right out of the textbook. That's how it's supposed to work, right?
It is supposed to work that way, yeah. We could probably talk for hours about
what really
issues
happens
with politics
right.
and some breakdown in the process. But I'm optimistic enough that we can have things be better and clearer and more straightforward for people.
So let me ask you a little bit about, being as young as you are, and also being a woman who's, you said there's 4 now women on the board?
Yes, now there's
4.
4.
So that puts you in a minority in a couple of different ways. I mean, how difficult is it to, and I think particularly because of your age, a lot of people who've been around, they say, well, you've been around a couple more decades, then you'll really know how things work. Right? So there is that kind of jadedness that comes with the long experience. How do you work? I'm assuming a certain amount of that must exist, that would exist in any political organization. So on the county board, how do you work with that? And how do you work to establish yourself as being a meaningful player, both from being a woman and being young in your 20s?
Definitely. Well, and I find it funny too, because I think in the political realm, that is something where, it's easy, I think, to dismiss someone, especially if you don't understand them and where they're coming from. But it's refreshing, and I know that my constituents, for the most part, when I meet them, and at first, they're kind of taken aback.
You're my commissioner?
Exactly.
Really?
But then I think once we have a conversation, they'll tell me, I'm so glad there's, fresh, young ideas in there, and we need more women on the board and in politics in general. So I think that gives an amount of confidence to know that I do have support from people who see the value.
Well, and what do you think the advantages are? I mean, it's true that being in your 20s gives you a different perspective, and you know things growing up that people like me have forgotten because it's been too long ago.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the advantages of your youth on the board?
I think, just having different experiences, getting to participate in a program like AmeriCorps and do direct service like that, and really get to see, another side of how people live and different struggles that people have. But I think having the energy and having the time are 2 really big things, because I don't have, I've chosen to make this my primary commitment. And
so you don't have another full-time job off
Exactly, yes.
else.
I've chosen to do this full-time. So a lot of people can't afford to do that if they do have, families and other jobs. It becomes more of a struggle to find and make that time. So I think that's definitely something. And, again, I have the time to go and talk to people. I have the time to meet with other elected officials. I have the time to meet with community leaders and go to events. And, I don't have to feel guilty about not being home for
Right.
supper on the table or whatever.
Cooking for the children, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
But, should that change 10, 15 years from now?
Sure.
Would you maintain the same level of commitment to the job?
I think it depends. And also, one of the reasons I chose to do this full-time starting off is just to kind of get the lay of the land and get my bearings and find out, do a little deeper digging, I'm sorry, with people in the community. So I think that initially I want to take the time, and then further down the road, I think maybe as things click into place and it becomes more of a natural process, and I understand, more and more how to get from A to B, then maybe it will still be necessary, maybe it won't, but it's hard to say at this point.
So what do you think are some of the things you've been able to accomplish? And I know it's been 2 years, it's a very short time, and being one person of 18, you can't just wave your hands and make it happen.
Yes,
But
as much as we wish we could.
as much as you'd like to be able to, you can't. So where do you think you've been effective in the 2 years you've been on the board?
Well, like I said, I know there's a lot of community organizations that really appreciate the fact that I'm reaching out to them and trying to bring some of their ideas to the board because...
Such as, I mean, think of an idea that you brought forth from your constituents.
Sure. Definitely when it comes to sustainability, reaching out with different organizations, trails and making that connection between our trail systems and local downtown economics and small business. It has more of an impact than you would think, and there's a group of people out there who are doing this work, but the connection hadn't been really made previously on the board. Different things like community gardens, different business advocacy groups. I mean, there's just a lot of...
Now, I would think that the one thing the DuPage guys would be good at is business advocacy and bringing
Sure,
business in.
sure. I mean, but again, there's a lot of different approaches, and even, are we going for corporate headquarters? Are we looking to help small businesses? And there's always new ideas coming forward, so different people stay on the pulse of things differently, and the county does do a good job of it. But of course, there's, like I said, there's many different approaches.
Now, you also talked before the show a little bit about transparency and the kinds of things you've worked on there. So talk about that a little. What have you done in terms of trying to improve transparency?
Sure, I've proposed that, because right now it's only the county board meetings that are taped for constituents to view, but supposedly, most of the conversations are supposed to originate in committee meetings, so it makes sense for those to be taped as well. And a lot of board members agree, so I think that is something that we're going to see in the near future. Just have to work out a couple, IT kinks and this and that, but also with the appointment process, there's different proposals that I've made to have that be a smoother process.
These are appointments to what, full-time jobs or boards or
to
what?
different boards and commissions, and then some of them have salary and benefits, some of them just get a stipend, some of them have no compensation, but I think to have a clear and uniform process there is important, and there's, again, we're not...
Isn't the process clear and uniform now? It's who you know.
Some might say, but I think, we can always do better, so, and then even accounting for hours on the board, that's something that I've been proposing.
Now, what's the issue there? Why would accounting? I mean, you guys get paid a salary, right? So.
Yes, so we get a salary, and people can sign up for a pension, and to receive that pension, you have to work 1,000 hours a year. But if you're not logging that, then I don't know how you can really justify if you don't have some kind of tracking.
And so today there is no uniform tracking mechanism?
No, there's not.
So as commissioner, you don't have to punch in and punch out or anything?
No, you definitely don't, unfortunately.
So is it?
But I think that definitely, because accountability is one of the things that the county has been talking a lot about lately, I think that falls into place quite nicely. So I would hope that, down the road, that'll be something considered.
Well, how would you, I mean, what's your proposal to solve that accountability? Is it to bring in a system or to, computerize it, automate it? I mean, how would you
Sure,
work on
yeah,
that?
I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of computer systems out there, and anyone would do, I think, just to get an idea to make sure that,
So it's really more a matter of trying to get the board to come along to say, yes, we need some uniform standard for tracking, right?
Right.
That's the first hurdle.
Right. And I think, constituents don't want to see board members, and not that board members necessarily feel entitled that I can do what I want when I want, but if you're not being accountable, then I think it can be perceived that way. And again, I think just avoiding any kind of perception that people might not be taking their job seriously, that's an issue for constituents.
It's an issue, yes. In fact, I think the most common issue when you ask people about why they don't vote is they're all a bunch of crooks and it doesn't matter which ones are in.
Yeah, I do hear that a lot. So.
And what's your response to them?
Well, my response is I'm definitely not.
I'm not one of them, right?
Yeah, I'm not a crook, but.
Yeah, be careful how you say that. There's a famous ex-president who said that.
There you go.
Yes.
Before my time, though.
Yes.
But what was I going to say? Yeah, and again, it's not, on one hand, it's the appearance that everything's okay, but on the other hand, it's being able to assure people, here's how we can really prove to you that everything is by the book.
Really above the board, yeah. So,
yeah.
And I'm glad to hear you stress that as well, because I think that we all know that perception becomes reality. And if people believe strongly enough that it's all crooked or none of it's accountable,
right.
then they lose hope.
Right.
That's actually a political tool in itself. Some factions like that because then the citizens and taxpayers and the voters are not involved.
Right.
But trying to counter that perception, even if there's some, truth to it, but trying to get people to understand that this can change and that it can be better. I'm glad to hear you talk about that because it's. I've paid attention to the political world for many years myself,
Yes.
and so I know that kind of approach is really, it's tough to sell, but it's critical, right?
It is. I really believe so.
So going forward, you're getting ready for another campaign for the November election. What does your platform talk about? What are the things you want to accomplish in your new 4-year term?
Yes. Well, I think, 2-year term is hardly enough time. I've basically scratched the surface. But I do want to continue with those transparency measures and, the different good governance things that I've proposed and make sure that they actually do get enacted. Also, when it comes to economic development, we do need to be really mindful about, planning regionally and encouraging both young people my age to stay in DuPage, but also to make sure that baby boomers can stay in the workforce in DuPage as long as they want to or have to.
Is that a problem that people are moving out of DuPage when they reach a certain age? Or?
Yeah, there is a lot of younger people are going, either to another state or to Chicago. Just different opportunities there, I guess.
Is it economic opportunity that causes that shift, or do you really know
It's
what's going on?
probably a variety of factors, I would think. But, just having a place where it is attractive for people of all ages to want to stay.
So what would you do? There's a lure. People who for example, people who want to live in a big city, right? Well, they're going to choose
we're never
Chicago,
gonna be,
right?
yeah,
you can't
that's
compete
not
with
good,
that,
yes.
right? But aside from that, what are the things that DuPage could do that could help to retain that really dynamic workforce, the young people? How would you go about that?
Well, I know there's been a big push for kind of more IT opportunities out here. But I think also just having a place where, like I was saying, having trails that have good connectivity, either to trains or to a downtown, and having that kind of feel where it has.
And when you say trails, you're not talking about hiking trails, right?
Yeah, I'm talking,
okay.
like the Prairie Path, for example, is one. DuPage has a really ornate trail system. And it does, like I said, connect into downtowns and promote local economic development, which is great. And then having, just those thriving downtowns and having it be a place where people feel like, I can work and nearby, I can go out, I can live, having that kind of mixed use development and really good, I think, suburban planning is important.
So you've clearly learned a lot in 2 years on
I
the
guess
board.
so.
Because I'm not sure that in AmeriCorps you would have been thinking about planned mixed
You'd be
development,
surprised.
right? Yeah.
But
How did you pick up all of this knowledge?
just through experience and through listening and having conversations with people. And like I said, I was a journalism student, so I'm used to doing research and trying to get to the bottom of it and asking questions. And that's been really useful so far.
I can imagine you know how to ask the right questions, right?
I try.
So what else are you trying to think about for your next term? You want transparency, economic development. What else might you be looking at?
Well, I'm vice chair for the environmental committee, and sustainability is really important to me. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities to pair that with economic development. But it also affects things like stormwater, and energy savings, cost savings, reducing waste. There's just a host of really good quality of life issues that come about. And we're currently working on a sustainability plan for DuPage right now.
And what's involved in that? What's sustainable about it? What gets sustained?
Well, it's focusing on reducing energy usage in homes and in businesses, and it's not like lights out for everyone. It's more kind of the wastefulness that we might not notice all the time, and being more mindful about that, and weatherizing and that kind of thing.
So what role does the county play in that? Obviously individual homeowners
Sure.
need to, if they're going to do something like that, if they're
Absolutely.
they're going to weatherize their house or whatever. So what does the county do? What incentives are offered?
Yeah, we're not forcing anyone to do anything, but we have signed up as a leader. We're actually the first cool county in Illinois, and that's a program through the Sierra Club. So I think with the sustainability plan, we're going to come up with ways to outreach, to businesses and to homeowners to show them the benefits, and the cost savings, can definitely be there.
And then there's obviously large infrastructure projects like water recycling,
Right.
sewage treatment, all of that stuff,
Right.
right? How about green space or alternative energies, and is that part of the sustainability plan as well?
Well, open space falls under the Forest Preserve more, not really the county. And I'm sorry, what was the second one?
Alternative energy, wind, solar, installation or installation so that they reduce energy flow. Are those things that get discussed?
To an extent. I think actually that more falls in line with the proposed stormwater fee. I'm not sure if you heard of it,
I
but
have not.
yeah, it was something that had been discussed, and the county hasn't talked about it too much recently. But
What was that going to do, the stormwater fee?
so basically, it was to encourage people to take personal responsibility for their personal property, whether it be home, business, church, school, but to make improvements on the property to kind of collectively fight stormwater issues. So if the thought is, if I have a giant parking lot and my water is, it's not going into the ground, it's going in
Right.
everywhere, into your yard maybe. So if I take some personal responsibility, and that's the thing, I would like to see an incentive program when it comes to that, to encourage people to do the right thing, but rather than punish people for not doing the right thing, have a reward and have maybe a property tax break.
So the fee would have been, you're not doing the right thing, so we're going to charge you a fee.
Yes.
And your sense is, well, okay, there's another way to approach that.
Yeah, and I
Let's
think
give it an
that's
incentive.
win-win. I think that, you could possibly have more people participating that way. But it all depends in the details and how it would be set up, and that's not it's not a bridge we've crossed yet, so.
But assuming you're reelected, you've got 4 more years to work on something like that,
Yes.
right? So let's talk about politics for a minute. How do you think your chances are for being reelected? Are you hopeful?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think I've done a good job, and I've definitely maintained contact with constituents, and I'm out there in the community all the time, and I think I've proven to be an independent voice on the board, and I think that's really important. I haven't just gone with the status quo. I ask a lot of questions, I make a lot of statements, and I speak my mind, and I hope that that's appreciated because I speak my mind on behalf of the people that I represent, and that's who I answer to.
So how do you build, and I'm glad to hear you speak your mind. I actually serve on a board myself, and people, my other board members are always looking at me like, oh, there goes McDermott again.
Yes,
That's
yes,
another
that
10
can
minutes of the meeting
happen.
because he wants to work on something. But I think it's valuable, as you have seen, that you do need to speak up. And going along to get along, there are certain things you need to go along with, obviously, in terms of just interpersonal dynamics.
Sure.
But, the idea of being elected is to represent what needs to be done and to be that voice to say, wait a minute, there's another perspective here.
Exactly.
Right? So I'm glad to hear, first of all, that you do that. But then how do you use that and use your position as an independent to work into coalitions and get your fellow board members to understand your point of view and try to swing a vote?
Well, I think a lot of the issues that we deal with really are not very partisan in nature. What's the Democratic or Republican way to do a road, arguably.
Right.
So I think that,
Just a matter of who gets the contract, right?
yes, I guess that would be one aspect. But I think it's kind of almost unfortunate that the county board, that you have to run partisan because I think it can make underlying tensions where there wouldn't otherwise necessarily be. And not that it's an issue all the time, but I think that there's definitely things like, good governance. I think that we're all on the same page about that, like I said, and, economic development, all those kind of things. So I think finding the common ground, partnering where we do share ideas and trying to work together and having open, honest discussions. It's, it takes two to tango, but I
does.
think, asking someone if they will, step up to the plate with you.
So as you move forward, and assuming you're able to move into a second term, which I wish the best of luck on, by the way.
Thank you.
What would be the first, what's your highest priority? If you were reelected, what's the thing you'd try to do first?
Well, yeah, I guess, like I said, kind of continue the projects that I've been working on and not
Not
relent,
let them drop, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then also I've been pretty involved in the community trying to fight the heroin epidemic. So that's something I would like to continue as well.
You mentioned that before the show, too, and I was shocked by that. You mentioned that there are more heroin deaths in DuPage County than traffic deaths?
Yes.
That's
yes.
astonishing.
Yes, it is. It's something that I don't think anyone in DuPage would have really seen coming. But like I said, I think a lot of it is stemming from prescription painkillers, and people end up getting hooked on that. So there is kind of a misperception about who are the people who are getting addicted to heroin. And like I said, it crosses all economic boundaries. You know, it's not in one cluster in DuPage. It's really spread throughout all ages.
And this is a trend that's been growing quite a bit recently, correct?
Right.
So what are things that the county can do to try to stem that?
The Regional Office of Education is working with schools, you know, to educate kids on one hand, and just getting the word out in the community. With law enforcement, they've actually had Narcan programs, so they're training police officers and sheriff deputies to be able to be first responders in case there is an overdose. So I think it's a combination of educating people and, you know, having, again, an open and honest conversation is the only way that we're going to get to the bottom of it. But I think also taking an active role in educating people about the misconceptions and making sure that people don't think, well, this could never happen to me or anyone I know.
Yeah, sure enough, it can and probably will at some point. Now, in Cook County, the Cook County Board also has indirect control over the large Cook County health system. Is there anything comparable in DuPage, a hospital system that DuPage runs as well that might help to be part of this solution to this problem?
Yes, the Board of Health and the Health Department have also been key active players in it as well. But yeah, we don't have our
There's
own
no
one particular.
hospitals, right?
Yeah, no, nothing
That's-
like Cook County has.
In fact, I know that's a source of complaints. Some of the Cook County people is like, oh, those DuPage guys keep coming over to use our services, but they're not paying us for that. So actually, speaking of that, does that come? I have talked to people in Cook County who have that perspective. Does that come up where the Cook County hospital system does say, look, we get patients from all over, but it's only Cook County taxes that pay for this. If this hospital system is going to be maintained on behalf of a much larger area, then that much larger area really ought to contribute to the maintenance of this institution. Does that come up, or is that a topic of conversation?
That's not anything that I've heard very specifically, but I know there has been a greater push lately when it comes to, you know, regional planning and development and transportation to partner with other collar counties and with Cook County so that we are taking a regional approach to addressing issues and
Big issues that affect everyone, like
Exactly.
public health, right?
Exactly.
Or infrastructure, roads, public transportation.
Right.
Right. Does the county board get involved in public transportation? You know, the PACE buses or any of that stuff? And
Yes.
to what extent? What's your role there?
Well, we have representation on all the public transportation boards. There's been a lot of discussion lately because of recommendations that have come out about the amount of funding and representation that the collar counties have. And so that's something that we're fighting, you know, to make sure that we do have representation because we are putting money into it. But yeah, expanding programs, especially, you know, for seniors and that kind of thing, it's constantly something that we're looking to improve on.
So you got about 15 seconds left. Anything you'd like to say to our audience in the last 15, 20 seconds?
Just make sure to get active and, you know, at the very least go vote, but really to think about.
You'd like them to vote for you, wouldn't you?
Well, sure, but
Okay.
just become educated on the issues.
Well, I hope they will, and I trust that after having seen you on TV that they'll feel much more inclined to do so.
Well, thank you again.
Laurie, thank you so much for being here. We've been visiting with Laurie Nowak, candidate for County Commissioner in DuPage County, and you're watching Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can see us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19, and you can find us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So, till next time, thank you and good night.